It has been a Mikel Arteta masterclass, utilizing the two of them. In this match, Moreno gets the goal, but Declan Rice playing higher up the field, I believe against the likes of a Madrid backline that's left wanting. We're going to get at them in a bit in the Copa del Rey because their backline's a sieve. If you can calculate which midfielder or false nine gets in the box first, it's going to create gaps for Bukayo Saka to operate in the Champions League.
Every time they catch a break, you got one coming back. Bukayo Saka is behind us here. Another one seems to go out injured, and that's been the issue for Arsenal this season. You do wonder how much closer would they have pushed Liverpool if they'd managed to keep these star players fit? Because, I mean, we saw it with Gabriel Jesus, scores some goals, then he gets injured. We've seen it here again. And Mikel Arteta, although I do think as a manager he's made some mistakes this season, tactical choices in games. They didn't sign a striker, which I do think was a mistake as well from the hierarchy in January. But also you have to say they have been a little bit unlucky, haven't they, with injuries coming at inopportune times. Yeah,
look, all advantage to Bayern Munich if this injury for Gabriel is longer than we think. Because right now, the season's done in the Premier League. It would take a massive collapse from Liverpool. But this was all about getting momentum ahead of the big clash against Bayern. You have Everton next. You should be able to handle that match. Everton's going to give them a run for their money. But if I'm Mikel Arteta, Jakub Kiwior, if he's going up against Harry Kane, let me put my Bavarian bib right in my chest because Bayern Munich are going to eat.
Well, luckily, they don't have to worry about that yet. They got to play a Real Madrid.
Oh, geez, forgot wrong side of the bracket.
So it's going to be a cakewalk. They just got to deal with those three attackers at Real Madrid. Yeah. But that is the problem. I mean,
Kiwior will be all right against Mbappe. Yeah, no problem at all.
Wrong side of the bracket. I'm at Real Madrid. Thank you.
But the point still stands, though, Michael, because, you know, as an Arsenal fan myself, I'm taking a look at it and trying to give myself reasons to believe that they can do something against Real Madrid. They're unbeaten in 20 matches against the Big Six of England under Arteta. I go back and look at the match last year at Manchester City, and I hate to say it, it was one of the most boring matches I've ever watched Arsenal play. They had 28% of the ball, but they were able to grind out a 0-0 against Manchester City at that time, that high-powered side. But that's with Gabriel and Saliba playing. If you lose I mean, they might have lost half of their backline in this match today, Adam. That's a different kettle of fish.
Absolutely. Gabriel and Saliba, and you know, we've spoken about this many times on the show. They were just so solid at the back, weren't they? The question marks weren't over their head about a mistake coming. Sometimes it did, but not often. But really, I just think they're going to struggle without him. Hopefully, it's not too serious. We'll obviously get, you know, in the next few hours, I'm sure it'll emerge. But just how bad it is, maybe it did look like a hamstring, didn't it? And that's obviously, I mean, Michael can speak to this a bit better than I can. But that's certainly a few weeks out. Unlikely going to see him before the end of the season. But they're going to miss him. I think for me, the major positive though was to see Saka playing. I think they played it perfectly. Right choice from Mikel Arteta not to throw him in the starting lineup, use him as a sub. He came on. He was obviously delighted to do that. I think, you know, just getting on the pitch and having a run around, let alone scoring a goal, would have been good. He's going to be so important from now until the end of the season if they're to achieve anything really and try to do what they want to do. Great to see him back on the pitch. And it was, you know, that moment there with the physio, it was a touching moment as well. And great to see a player recognise the importance of the backroom staff.
Yeah, Bukayo Saka is an amazing talent. As I get my head squared back on as they do play Real Madrid and not Bayern Munich. This was kind of that sort of fairy tale platform for him to come back, get that goal. But the bigger thing is the surrounding pieces around him. Declan Rice and the likes of Mikel Moreno, what they've done in the absence of Bukayo Saka. You go back to the PSV match, it has been and Mikel Arteta masterclass, utilizing the two of them. In this match, Moreno gets the goal, but Declan Rice playing higher up the field, I believe against the likes of a Madrid backline that's left wanting. We're going to get at them in a bit in the Copa del Rey because their backline's a sieve. If you can calculate which midfielder or false nine gets in the box first, it's going to create gaps for Bukayo Saka to operate in the Champions League.
I think we also have to give a comment towards Gabriel Martinelli as well, because the goal that Saka scored was all Martinelli. He makes a direct run, and he makes a great ball to the outside, and then comes in and has that incredible flick onto Saka. Arsenal have needed more of that from a player who they really, especially when everybody else was injured in Martinelli. If he can add some of that, maybe you give Arsenal at least a fighting chance, especially at home in that first leg against Real Madrid. Let's talk about this Manchester United side, though. They fall to Nottingham Forest. typically, if you were doing a blind taste test, you'd think that it was Manchester United in the top 4 and Forest at the middle of the table. But the roles are reversed, and is that what we saw in this match here today?
I think we saw Manchester United side the most glaring thing about them is the lack of a true center forward, the lack of someone who can get it done, even after you give up a goal the way they did. You should never give up a goal the way Anthony Elanga got the ball off your own set piece and ran the full length of the field. I just question the lack of mobility. Manu Ugarte, just not good enough on the day. I thought he was invisible in terms of defensive transition. But if you're Manchester United, you get almost, 20-something shots away from home at the City ground, and you can't get a goal. That is more glaring. You need to sort that out because you have a big match in the Europa League coming up. Those are the fine details and the margin that could see them knocked out of Europe.
I do think there were, particularly in the first half, some causes for optimism, though. This wasn't as bad as we've seen from Manchester United early on in the season. I certainly feel like the trend is, although the results haven't been perfect recently, there is a bit of an upward trend. And you've got to remember that these players are, a lot of them, playing for their futures, because there is going to be a rebuild coming, and it's probably going to be Ruben Amorim who's sticking around to do it over the summer. So these players are playing for their future at Manchester United, because the ones he doesn't fancy, they're going to be gone. And I did get a sense, particularly the second half, it was following that theme that you mentioned there, that they created a lot of opportunities but weren't able to score. But in the first half, they were at least looking like they were up for it a little bit more, playing with a bit more confidence, and hopefully that will carry through to the Europa League, because that really is their season. That's their ticket back into Europe next season. You know, if they finish inside the top 10 in the Premier League, that's possible, but who really cares? It doesn't matter, does it? For them, they've got to try and get to the final of the Europa League, and maybe they'll be able to take a bit of confidence from the first half. I feel like I'm clutching at straws here. You're looking at me like, what's he on about? I don't think it was. We've seen some terrible performances from Manchester United this season. That first half wasn't one of them.
No, you can question things about their commitment in previous matches, but the thing that we keep questioning is if it's not Bruno that's scoring the goals, where are they coming from? Where are the goals going to come from? And I think that was symptomatic of today. Casemiro gets a good opportunity. Diego Dallo gets a good opportunity. A proper center forward, you at least get either 1-1 against a Forest side that they get the result, but over the 90 minutes, they were there for the taking.
Nobody wants to hear this, especially from a club the size of Manchester United. It's not about results for them this year. Once they made that managerial move, this is about establishing a culture and an identity, which they haven't had for far too long. And to go back to your point earlier, Adam, to bring it back around to Forest, the idea of sides looking as motivation to prove people wrong, a lot of us thought that Forest were going to be in a relegation battle this year. And as they kept staying in the top 4, speaking of a side with an identity, you kept wondering, can they keep this up? Can they keep this up? That's not even really a question anymore, is it?
And they showed a versatility as well, because Hudson-Odoi wasn't playing, and he's been part of that, that front 5, Chris Wood, Elanga, this team going forward that hasn't really changed that much. And obviously it's been lucky for Nuno that he hasn't had too many serious injuries that he's needed to change it, and that's largely the reason why they're in this position. But they have shown an ability in this game to be versatile. They were missing that player, but they were still able to get the goal they needed. I mean, that goal from Elanga was brilliant.
Oh my
they
gosh.
completely caught Manchester United napping at the start of the game. It was only after 5 minutes. It's incredible what Forest have done this season, and now it looks like they want to seize that moment and get into the Champions League, because it's been, back in the day, obviously before my time, but in the 70s, Forest were one of the biggest clubs in England. This was a team who was in the Champions League year in, year out, the days of Clough and all the great players that played for them. They want to get back to that moment, and even if they only get one season in the Champions League and then flame off into the distance, I think that would be great for their fans to just really get the reward at the end of such a brilliant season.
Yeah.
No comments from Mr. Lahoud about whether or not the 70s were my time.
I did have one.
I knew where you were going with it. I can see the look on your face.